Welcome to Scale Her Up, the show for female business owners and leaders who want to grow profitable, sustainable businesses without burning out. I'm Dr. Brenda Hector, a business growth specialist helping women develop themselves and their businesses so they can achieve their goals and enjoy the lifestyle they dream of. In this episode, you'll hear inspiring stories, honest conversations, and practical strategies to help you start, grow, or scale your business. If you're new here, hit follow so you don't miss an episode and come and join our Scale Her Up Facebook community to keep the conversation going. I'm delighted to have Soumya Palliyil with me, whose business is Brigid Bio. Soumya, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Brenda. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So let's start with a bit of information about Brigid Bio. What is it that you do?
So Brigid Bio is a brand new spin out from the University of Aberdeen. I'm very excited. I always say we spun out in July last year, 2025. So a brand new biotech company from the University of Aberdeen. We are developing treatments, novel treatments for a type of fungal infection called invasive fungal infections. So now everyone is familiar with superficial fungal infections on the skin, a bit of dandruff, but what we are looking at are serious, deep-seated fungal infections. And these infections are particularly serious and life-threatening in immunocompromised patients, patients undergoing chemotherapy, organ transplantation, and some complex surgeries like abdominal surgeries, and also in chronic liver diseases. In these patients, their immune system is impaired, which means there is high risk of contracting infections, especially fungal infections. And we are looking at high mortality rate in these patients, mortality rate of 40 to 80%, which is unacceptable in this day and age. So there are several limitations to current antifungal therapies. And with my research with another academic within the University of Aberdeen, we have been working on developing novel therapies to invasive fungal infections for the last 10 years. And we developed these novel solutions, which recently we managed to spin out into a biotech company called Brigid Bio to develop this further and commercialize into the market. Now, the name, I have to mention the name Brigid Bio. So a lot of people ask us why Brigid Bio. So again, the name was suggested by the co-founder of the business, Professor Carol Munro, who's also a medical mycology expert within the University of Aberdeen. So Brigid is the Celtic or Irish goddess of healing and health. So we wanted to have a bit of that Celtic connection with the business. And if you look at the logo, company logo, we have a Celtic ring and an antibody, because this therapy is a monoclonal antibody therapy. And we have a tartan-wearing monoclonal antibody on the logo. So that's thought process behind the company.
I love that. And it fits so well with the Scale Her Up message, like the goddess. So it's about, women's empowerment. And so the two co-founders.
Yes, there are three of us, but three co-founders in the business. The third co-founder is quite a senior person, again an academic, but have done spin-out companies in the past and quite a prominent figure in Scottish biotech industry. But the two female co-founders, myself and Professor Carol Munro, as a team, we decided we should, the name should signify that the female role in the business.
Oh, fantastic. Any regular listeners will know that I very recently interviewed Deborah O'Neill. Yes. Yeah. My first degree was in biotechnology.
Oh,
many years ago. And my career's taken a bit of a turn since then. So I'm really interested in the science and obviously the business and the spin out from the university. So if I get too geeky for the listeners, I'm sorry, but I have to understand a bit of what's going on there. So you were a researcher at the university.
That's right.
Yeah. And now you're a founder of a business. Did you always know that were you aiming for a spin out? Was entrepreneurship going to be your thing, or is it just something that you've ended up having to do because that's where your research has taken you?
I think I would say I always wanted to be on the kind of translational side. So my research has always been translational research. So I came to the University of Aberdeen 20 years back to do my master's in biotechnology. So that was funded by the Commonwealth British Council scholarship. So I did my first degree in India and came to do my master's in Aberdeen and continued with my PhD. So those kind of formative years, I was placed in an academic lab which had very close connection to industry. My PhD supervisor, he had set up a biotech company and sold it to one of the pharma companies. So I was in that lab. I was in that environment and always seen the way how you do scientific research, and that scientific research then get transformed or translated into meaningful products, drugs or diagnostics for the patients. So I've always seen that. And after the PhD, I got the opportunity to set up an antibody drug discovery center at the University of Aberdeen called Scottish Biotech facility. And I was part of that kind of initial setting team, and then continued and currently the head of Scottish Biologics facility. So that has been, so we've done that in 2010. So it's almost 15 years. And the very successful, I'm very proud to say that it's a successful and internationally known antibody discovery center. And I worked with several partners in that role as the head of Scottish Biologics facility. We had commercial projects with industry partners. We also had academic projects. So there's always that kind of the goal of each of these projects in the Scottish Biologics facility is to develop our research outputs into either a diagnostic product or a therapy. Well, maybe we can't take it all the way through to the clinical trials and into the market, but we would do it take it to a stage where we have shown that these drugs work in our words, we say in an in vivo infection model or a preclinical model. And then we would partner with other biotech or pharma companies for further development. So that's always been the kind of like underlying thread during my research. When an opportunity came to further develop the antifungal therapy and then set up Brigid Bio, it was like, I would say, a natural evolution of what I've been doing throughout my career as a researcher. And I love that concept of like you develop a scientific idea or you have that scientific research then gets translated into real world products that can make an impact to the real world. Always enjoyed doing that part of science.
Yeah, no, I think it's great that the science that anyone is doing is related, can be benefited by society, not just research for the sake of research. So
Absolutely.
you've
And
still
that's,
got to get funding for anything that's just research for the sake of research these days.
yeah, currently, yes, but it was not the case.
No,
I would say it
no.
was always, the push was always to do basic research. And and I think even a traditional university like Aberdeen, it used to be like that, but there is a big shift now into innovation and even in the university entrepreneurship. So there is a lot of support available within the university, within Scotland, I would say, to take this fantastic science. We have a lot of great science coming out from all our Scottish universities all over UK, but being in Scotland. And but a lot of this gets just only in research papers and won't go anywhere further than that. So that needs to change, and there is a big shift happening. Lots of funding now. So you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an interesting business model spin out from research because, and Deborah explained it very well, that it can take a long time from having something that you think is going to have an impact to actually having a product that a customer can buy or a patient can be treated with. So businesses like yours have to generate a whole load of money before they're anywhere near selling a product.
Yeah.
So just for people who don't understand that, talk me through what you're doing at the moment as a very early stage spin out from the university.
No, that's absolutely, this is the way. So I said our research has been going on for the last 10 years. How we identified these novel molecules, these monoclonal antibodies to treat fungal infections. This is a lot of background or a basic research that went at the early stage. So this is one thing I have to point out, that why there is a lot of challenges associated with having new drugs to treat fungal infections is because fungi are very similar to us in their cellular structure and their architecture. So to develop a drug which is toxic to the fungal pathogen and not toxic for us that's quite challenging because so drug toxicity is a key limitation of several of the current antifungal drugs. patients develop due to toxicity, you might have to discontinue the antifungal treatment. And especially when you are immunocompromised, this is when your own immune system is not working. So you're basically dependent on these molecules, these antifungal drugs. And because of the toxicity, a lot of these drugs won't work. And also drug resistance. So we all hear about antimicrobial resistance or AMR, but predominantly like AMR, people hear AMR in the context of antibacterial resistance. So antibiotics, for example. So this is the main reason when you go to a GP, unless there is a bacterial infection, you won't get an antibiotic. So the more emphasis or the awareness is around antibiotic resistance, but not a lot on antifungal resistance. Antifungal resistance is also on the rise. One example I would say is, I said there are only three limited number of drugs to treat antifungal infections. We say three classes. Out of this one class called a class of drugs called azoles, they are the ones to treat if you have a lung infection, mold aspergillus, which is a mold infection, mostly in people with any kind of like chronic lung disease. You are prone to this. But this aspergillus is also a mold, which means in crops, for crop protection, you have to use this fungicide as part of it. This is essential for our food security. We need to use this antifungal to protect the crops. But because of this widespread use of this particular class of antifungal in agriculture, we have high rise of resistance to this class of drug. And this is the only class of drug which will act in aspergillosis, a lung infection in patients. And you are seeing a lot of drug resistance, which means this drug is not acting anymore in patients. So this is a big problem. So when we started this project, we wanted to look at ways of developing a new drug which will address all these issues. And with Professor Monroe's work, I identified certain kind of drug targets, we call them, which are quite unique for fungal targets. And we made monoclonal antibodies to treat this. So all this just took a very long time. I won't go too much into the science of this, but just to show that to identify a drug kind of potential molecule, it took us 10 years. Where we are at this stage is we are now showing the activity of drug in preclinical models, we say. So in infection models in mice, in smaller animal models, because once we show the efficacy, the activity of the drug, once we show that the drug is safe to be used in animals, then only we can then take the drug to human trials. And even the human trials there are several stages for human trials. You have first stage, which we call phase 1 human trial, where you show the safety of the drug. So you would only test this drug in healthy volunteers. We don't test this in patients to start with. So healthy volunteers you start, and you show that the drug is safe to be administered. And this is all backed up by a panel of studies you have done in vivo models. Then you take it to the phase 1. Once you show that the drug is safe, then the regulators, then you move on to the phase 2, which would be a small group of patient population. Then you move to a phase 3, which will be like a few hundred patients, and maybe in different geographies and all that. And it is a very long process, like you said. It takes 10 plus years and a lot of investments. We're talking about now the kind of general industry trend is you have to raise $1 billion to take a drug all the way from discovery into the markets. Huge investment, huge time scale of development. It's very challenging. So for companies like us, we also spin out companies like us, early stage companies. We don't have the money. We won't have the expertise to take it all the way through to these large scale human trials. So what we usually do as a business model, like you said, we would de-risk. What we call is we de-risk these compounds, these drug compounds. We show that this works first in animal models. Then we also need to show that these drugs are easy to manufacture and we can scale the manufacturability of these drugs. So we show that and do the early stage studies like phase 1 and maybe phase 2. So in that small patient group, then we would partner with a biotech or a pharma with the budget. Those partners will have the budget and expertise to take it to wider scale.
Where does the funding come from at this early stage?
So it's a range of sources. So usually investors. So there are specialist investors who would invest. So we have the angel investors, we have VCs. We also have non-dilutive funding. So now the area we are in, which is anti-infectives, which is developing drugs for infectious diseases, are quite, again, there is additional challenges to raise investment in this. So not all VCs or not all angel investors would invest in anti-infective companies, because there are, again, barriers when it comes to a later stage. When it comes to the marketing of the drug, there are barriers for bringing a novel anti-infective drug into the market. And this is because if you have a really good, and predominantly this is because of the antibiotics resistance. So if you bring a new drug into the market, usually that's kept as the drug of last resort. So you wouldn't straight away use it, because you use a drug, the pathogen, the bacteria is eventually going to develop resistance to it. That's the way these microorganisms, the bacteria, are built, or fungi are built. But there are specialist investors, we call them impact investors. So there are specialist investors who would invest in anti-infective companies. There are non-dilutive funding also available, which means these are, again, commercial fundings, but the funding is not on the basis of you sharing the equity of the company. So non-dilutive funding, and then there are public fundings as well. One thing that the governments have realized is the threat of antimicrobial resistance, and have pledged funding for early stage companies, because this is where all the innovation is happening. So there are some funding available, like in the US, it's a funding body called CARBEX, and there's BARDA. So these are the specialist funding bodies who would invest or support the development of novel anti-infective drugs. So it's a few of these sources. And as a CEO or leading the company, like, my job is to always keep on top of what all funding sources are out there, and then go and
That was where my questioning was going to go next. I guess as a researcher for 10 years working on this research, there's somebody at my door. Can you give me a second?
Yeah, no problem. I'm in the middle of a podcast recording, so I'll come and find you. That's what.
Sorry about that.
And that's okay. Perfect timing. There was someone
At your door as well. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking, as a researcher, you're used to having to apply for funding to keep the research going. Is it different as a researcher to now a business?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way you write research grants versus you still have to write grants. So the non-dilutive funding I was talking about is based on, in most cases, you start with an application and then go on to a panel interview and then get the funding. So there is still that element of writing an application. However, with this type of commercial grant application, you need to have a real focus on the commercial aspect of the product. So you need to have a real solid science kind of foundation, but at the same time, you should also understand the market. So what is the market you're trying to serve? What's the size of the market? And how do you enter the market? So the route to market, what is your plan? Who is in your team? And it has to be a good mix of people with scientific expertise, but also business skills of commercial experience as well. So there are several of these aspects that we need to address when we go and write these commercial grant applications. Similarly, when you go and speak to investors, it is a different, again, type of conversation compared to how you speak to grant funders. So here I did mention that the investors we speak to are impact investors. So they are also driven with that ambition to create an impact with their investment. But end of the day, they are investors. They are also looking for a return of their investment. So we need to really show them where the market is, what's the value that we are bringing, what's the value proposition, what we are bringing onto the table, and how can the investors then get their money back. So we never had to think about any of that with research grant applications. So that is a big difference with that type of raising funding for the business.
We talk about unconscious incompetence. So when you start off on something, you think, oh, I'll be able to do that. Like driving a car. You don't realize how difficult it is to drive a car until you're sat in the driver's seat. And so what were the things that you didn't realize were going to be tough when you did the spin out?
You know what? I have seen, like I said, so, the challenge is a lot of this is, again, I was quite fortunate to be during my academic career to be very closely associated with industry partners and
not everybody is, are they?
Yeah, so I think I'm quite in a unique position that way. So, for example, when I did my PhD, was funded by a program called Knowledge Transfer Partnership. So I was a KTP associate. So the knowledge transfer partnership happens between. So there will be a company who would like to tap into the innovation in the university to drive or scale up their business, and that funding comes from the innovative UK government, and the company only needs to put in 30%. The 70% comes from the government. But how the knowledge transfer partnership works is there are three partners in that. So one is the company partner, then the academic partner, and you also have a young graduate who would usually work as a KTP associate. And I was a KTP associate, and I that project was also allowed, because it's a three years project, that allowed me to then convert that project into my PhD. So I would say, so those 3 years of my KTP life, I could see how a young company who's trying to drive
Mm.
innovation in that business is tapping the academic or the scientific expertise in the university, but also how they are raising their funds therein and then driving their business forwards. And you would, because I had that kind of like that unique position working between two partners, I am very much aware of the challenges in the space, and it's not an easy journey. It's running a biotech business is not easy. The science is risky, and like you said, long development times, and also that kind of uncertainty of where the next funds are coming from. Because in a lot of, you wouldn't get the whole, if you need 10 million to take your drugs from the stage where you are now into the clinical studies, nobody's going to give you unless you are in a really, you have proven your expertise. If early stage companies always they do this in different like, tranches. You'll complete one round of fundraise, then from the next day onwards, you're out there for the next. So that's the reality in biotech business. And I've always seen that from my KTP time. And then when we were setting up the Scottish Biologics facility, that facility, so it's 15 years in running. So initially that the funding came from the university and Scottish, an organization called Scottish Life Sciences Alliance. But after 2 years, we were self-sustained, which means we were always bringing in our own funds, either through grants or through commercial partnerships. So I've always been, and I've always seen this is the reality. So when Brigid Bio, we decided to start Brigid Bio and then spun out, I know for a fact that this is very much it's constantly like you need to look out for funds and then get funds into the company for the existence. Otherwise, we won't exist. So I think I was prepared for that, I would say, through my academic life.
Yeah, yeah. So do you think there are lots of potential businesses like Brigid Bio that maybe the researchers haven't had that exposure with the commercial, or it, has it been a bit easier for you than for others? And are there others that don't actually get there because I think that KTP thing is amazing. I think there should be a lot more of that going on.
Yeah, it's a wonderful program. I was the KTP. So for that one, I was a KTP associate. We had another one after a few years where I became the academic supervisor. Then it was with the local biotech company. But this is very much, it's very, very popular amongst all the universities. And we have a great KTP, North of Scotland KTP Centre, which is based in Aberdeen, and fantastic support. But you could see a lot of innovation, and a lot of the young associates get trained and they then go on and then, create either creating something on their own, or they would then join companies and like in senior level jobs. And so it's a great training program. And yeah, your question about there are a lot of opportunities or science that are still coming out of universities, which has the potential to be spun out into companies for commercialization. And I think that is now we have recognized that we have the support or we have the funding or early stage funding for that. Scotland is quite amazing in that respect. We have the Scottish Enterprise who fund, and we have been part of that funding program for Scottish Enterprise, called the High Growth Spin Out Program. So what that funding helps is for projects like ours with commercial potential. SC funding will help us to then validate the commercial viability of that project, help us to build a commercial team around. Because again, coming from an academic background, most have a real good expertise in science, but not that commercial experience. So to know speak the language of the commercial world and to understand, what, because again, that technology or whatever you're developing might have massive potential, but you need to really identify one key area where you could position that. So that positioning of your technology or your product is very important. So in these kind of commercial aspects of, so that you start thinking with the funding from Scottish Enterprise. Another great program I wanted to highlight is Innovate UK has a program called iCure. So this is again helping academics to do a market research and then develop a compelling business plan. And if you do that, so there are 2 or 3 different parts for that IQR program. By the time you go through all the three to 4 parts of that program, you would have spoken to several of your potential customers. You would have identified the market value. You would know where you want to position your product. You'd have a business plan, etc. So there are a lot of programs available now. No, it was never the case. I would say 15 years back when I finished my PhD. There are more and more of these programs coming up, and I can see that at the university, a lot of academic colleagues are taking up the opportunity and then developing their ideas further.
And there's a massive, within Aberdeen, the Opportunity Northeast, we've got a great life sciences hub in Aberdeen now, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Opportunity Northeast and the BioHub. So BioHub is just next door to where we are based again. So so when we were thinking about Brigid developing the antifungal project into a company, I attended an accelerator program, which was organized by the BioHub. And this was during the COVID time. And so that accelerator program connected me to key people within this biotech, but also in anti-infectives. And the conversations I had with those people and those warm introductions that BioHub or any of these organizations make, and then you're getting that opportunity to speak to key people in industry, and then that really helps to shape up your business.
I don't think you can underestimate I think a lot of people do underestimate the value of networking.
Yeah. I was one of them. I have to say, several years back, it was. And one thing is, you need to get out there. You need to go out. You need to speak to people, and it's very difficult. I still think it is slightly difficult, especially from Aberdeen, because most of these events used to happen either in Edinburgh or Glasgow or down south. So to travel there, and if you're a junior academic, there are barriers for you to do that. But with Opportunity Northeast and again this Innovate UK iCure program coming to Aberdeen, which is now organized by Aberdeen University and BioHub, Scottish Enterprise, and so they are all there. So I think we've put Aberdeen on that map now, which means more and more of these opportunities coming to Aberdeen, which our academics can make use of.
Brilliant. We're here to promote women in business. And what advice would you give to another woman thinking of starting or spinning out?
I think so. For me, I'm a very, I would say, careful. I think a lot before I make a decision. And I had to think quite a lot before I made that decision. And it's because of all the risk associated with having a business. It is high risk, but also high rewarding. It's just that because for me, every day is different for me. And one day I might be looking into the science. One day I might be I will be looking at the finances and all that, which is all great and great learning experience. I would say just be passionate. But I've enjoyed. So that passion should be there. So when be passionate, you should enjoy what you're doing, because it's not a 9 to 5 job. It's going to be part of your life. You're on a long haul flight. So that is really important. And perseverance, that resilience, it is not, there are loads of ups and downs in this type of career. So I need to be quite resilient and just should have that kind of bounce back, and I will come back, and that is very important. One key advice is don't try to do this yourself. So support is essential here, and then build a nice team around you. Again, I was quite fortunate because of this 20 years within the university. The people I've met, people who've been my mentors and as a co-founders in the business, I've known them for decades now. So you really know how they are. And then that's the core team. Those are the people. Then you should know, they know your strengths, they know your weakness. So they don't really need to cover up anything in front of them, but they are also the sounding board. So again, I'm not an expert on everything. You ask people, you ask them. You can also ask if there's a great support system around you. Don't be shy. Go and ask for help if needed. But the key thing is that you need to be resilient, hard work. You need to be prepared to put in a lot of hours into this. I'm not that don't underestimate and travel being away from family. I have a young family, so it's a lot of so that you also need to have that support from your family, because it gets hard sometimes, but it's also enjoyable and rewarding. That kind of key focus on I need to make an impact with what I'm doing. That is the kind of
Yes.
that drives you forward.
Yeah. I've turned your answer into a model. You said passion, you said perseverance, and I went, oh, I wonder if there's another P. And then you said you can't do it on your own. So that's people. So be passionate about it. Perseverance, you got to stick with it when it's hard and surround yourself with the right people to help you on the journey.
Yeah,
I love it.
absolutely.
I love it. So let me talk about the people. Who's been your biggest supporter so far?
Well, I have to say there are several people around me and the co-founders of the business, Professor Carol Monroe and Professor Andy Porter. And Andy he's been my master's supervisor, PhD supervisor. So that journey has been over 20 years now. And with Professor Carol Monroe, we started this project 10 years back. So it's almost over a decade. There is a real support from Aberdeen University, the research and innovation team. When we were spinning out, the support that they gave was tremendous. People from SC, so the kind of the support around in Scotland, Scottish Enterprise has been amazing. Opportunity Northeast by the BioHub, Innovate UK. And I think so this is important. So sometimes I think, maybe it's cultural as well. I it, maybe you just do things, you just deliver, and then over a period of time, people will recognize like who you are and what you are like. And they are genuinely happy to support you. So just it's one thing I always say is just be genuine, be yourself. And try to one thing I would have initially, my kind of misconception was to CEOs are a certain type of, like there is a type of, this is a mold, you need to fit into a type of mold. But then over the course of time, what I realized was, no, this is not what it is. You be authentic, be your own personality, and then just be approachable and genuine. And then people will start recognizing you and people will start supporting you. And I'm quite proud to say that the network I built around it spans over 20 years, and it's very close, and it's very strong and a close network, and I'm quite proud to be part, to have built that network around me.
Yeah, well done. Well done. I think that's a brilliant lesson for anyone listening, actually. Yeah, your the people around you are going to be what drives you forward, enables you to move forward. And it sounds like if you didn't have that network around you, Brigid Bio wouldn't be where it is today and where it's going in the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that is. And every time. So now that's another key. And both Carol and I, when we go, we're very keen to establish partnerships, not just in the UK. So both of us are very passionate to make this a difference, in a global difference. And they didn't go too much into the details of this particular infection, but this is very much affects a lot of this. We say disproportionately affect a lot of people in global south. So we both are very passionate about making a difference in low middle income countries. And we have established partnerships in countries like India, Pakistan. And so this is all very important. But again, this is where people skills comes into place. So just to understand different cultures and then win their trust and set up partnerships. That's also very much important for the success of a business like ours.
Yeah. Soumya, I'm running out of time. I could keep talking and I'm sure we will keep talking. I think it's great what you're doing, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where Brigid Bio gets to on this journey. Thank you very much for joining me on the show. It's been a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Brenda. And yeah, I've really enjoyed talking to you. So thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you to you, the listeners, for listening to Scale Her Up. If you enjoyed this episode, Please follow the show and leave a review. It helps more female business owners to find us. Come and join our Scale Her Up Facebook community to get support, accountability, and connection with other women who get it. And remember, only 1 in 3 UK entrepreneurs are female. So Brigid Bio has turned that statistic around with only one man on their founder team. But yeah, only 1 in 3 UK entrepreneurs are female, and men are still 5 times more likely to scale their business beyond £1 million in turnover than women. When we start and scale our businesses to the same extent as men, we'll add £250 billion to the UK economy and create millions of jobs. Ladies, you can do it, and your business can make a massive difference.